Hello, you're listening to Better Financial Futures. I'm your host, John Boatman. After 3 decades in financial advice, I've seen how small, informed decisions can trans someone's life. This podcast is my way of sharing that experience so that even one listener can take a step to a better financial future. Now, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Neil Stewart. Now, Neil has got an incredible background in property, but we're going to be talking about better financial futures and we're going to talk about his past and his journey into property. Neil, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you've gone into the world of property.
You're welcome, John. Thank you for inviting me onto your amazing podcast. My future or my journey into property was I kind of was self-employed with a company, an IT company, and was realizing I didn't really have a pension or any income if I didn't work or if I took any leave, things like that. And so I thought, property back then when I was looking at it was very, very popular on the news and on the telly all the time, which it still is. And I thought, let's have a go at that. So that's really what made me start thinking I would start building up a portfolio that would actually be my pension or my income going forward.
What was your financial education like? When did you start thinking about money and what that was, and how did that look for you in your education?
It's quite interesting you asked that because it was never one of those taboo subjects in the family. You hear a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, we don't talk about money," or "We don't, we don't do that. We don't say like that," or "We don't talk about that in the family." Whereas mine was always, my parents were always quite open about money. I suppose that's probably their background, their upbringing, and it wasn't ever a problem to sort of shy away from it. So the understanding of money and how it works and how to do it wasn't something I knew straight away, but I wasn't scared of getting involved in.
Yeah. Did you learn about money at school? Do you remember?
I think all I remember about learning from that whole episode at school was that a check only lasts for 6 months or something, or 3 months, something like that. So the school tried to have a class about it, but it wasn't really. And funny enough, my wife's daughter just did business education at one of the local schools here. And I asked her, "What are you doing? Are they teaching you about being an entrepreneur?" And she goes, "Yeah, we're learning what the word entrepreneur means." And I said, "Pardon?" She says, "We're learning what the word entrepreneur means." I go, "So are you doing anything about that? Are they giving you a project? Are you going to create a business, something, and try and sell it?" And she goes, "No, we're just learning about what it means." So it isn't great at school, is it?
It's not good, and I think we're not just focusing on young adults and children, but also as you get older, you pick up bad habits about money. And just, I mean, obviously for me, property as a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, but as a financial advisor, lots of people's first major investment is their home, their property. But I know that we've spoken about this. I think that people are getting much older before they can afford to buy their first home, never mind invest in property. Do you think property is only now for the wealthy, or what's your feeling on that?
No, not at all. I mean, getting on the property ladder for your own home is more of a challenge, and you hear a lot of people going to the bank of mum and dad, so mum and dad help them with the deposits and things like that. Getting involved with property as an investment is a totally different kettle of fish, and you don't need a lot of money to get started. So yeah, it depends on which way you're going, whether you're talking about for your own personal home or going for investment property. And I think we had a chat earlier about this, is that those people buying for their own personal home are probably coming um, around about their 30s. I think we were working out probably early 30s. My son's just got his second home and he's 32. And he's gone bigger because he's had a child. And but people coming to investment properties seem to be in the late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah. So you don't need a large amount of capital to get started, is what you're saying. And there's obviously different entry points and obviously different parts of the world, or part of the we're in the UK, but there's parts of the world that are a lot more expensive, and there's parts of the UK that are way more expensive, such as London, compared to maybe our good friends in Wales, for example. I know you've got some experience over the bridge into Wales.
Absolutely. There's a big difference. I mean, London is almost like a little country on its own. The economy and the house prices and the way things work in London are almost separate to the rest of the world, or the rest of the country, sorry. And yeah, you touched on properties in Wales being much cheaper, and obviously you get better return for your money. You can buy more for your money. You can get better income from it.
What would you be your top tips of anyone listening or watching our content today in regard to buying property initially, maybe for their own home? What do you think are the misconceptions, misunderstandings when buying property? And then maybe you could touch on as an investment in buying property. What are the kind of major mistakes or tips you would suggest?
I'll see examples for, I mean, I can talk about my son who's just happened. I mean, the examples that young people buy in their own home is they're very, not naive, but uneducated. So they just accept things that they're told. One of the biggest things that happened with my son was they were told to clean their house before they moved out, and that the other house would be clean they moved into. So they actually went and paid for a cleaner to come and clean for their house. But when they moved to the new house and got the keys, it was filthy. And the main learning was there. Don't take people's word for it. In your industry, John, that IFAs are probably totally different. You're different to somebody else, and you'll give different advice, and probably your ethics are different to somebody else. It's the same with, without wanting to pigeonhole them, sales agents and estate agents. Some are amazing, and some are just not so great, and they were let down. So if you're going to buy your own home, I would say do as much research as you can. Lean on people that have already bought a home. If your parents have bought a home, it might have been a long time ago. So you need to find somebody a bit more recently that's bought a home and find out what mistakes they made, what things went wrong with them. My son got me to come and look around the house with him before he bought it. And I picked up various things that he should be asking questions about. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that." So that's the biggest thing I'd say to anybody who's going to buy a home is get somebody who's done it recently or got experience in it to come along and give them advice. Because 9 times out of 10, it's probably the biggest expense they have for their whole life, and they won't move for a long period of time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you probably agree. I don't think there's a right time to invest in property, is there? It's now is the time. It's
Absolutely, yeah. Now is the right time to invest. You hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'll wait till the interest rate's right," or "I'll wait till house prices change," or "I'll wait till the renter's right bill has gone through and see what happens. I'll wait for tax to change." These are things that just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and then you never actually do anything. What you need to do is take all of those things in consideration, put them in the pot, and work out what you have to do to make sure you buy a right investment property that takes all of those factors into consideration and then still makes you money.
I think expecting a return on your investment really quickly is a mistake, because it's your home. You should be buying a property, in my view, as your home first. And if it does increase in value, that's a secondary consideration. And I think a lot of people see all the TV programs and the influencers, and buying property always makes money. I'll be honest with you. My first experience of buying a property in the mid 80s, I'm showing my age, I bought at the wrong time, and it took a long time before it started to increase in value. It's just the timing of the actual investment. So is that your experience? Certainly when people are buying their first home, they're looking at pricing and, am I going to make money, rather than focusing on it as a home.
I would never ever think your home and treat your home as an investment initially. I mean, you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and he calls it a liability, which it is, because a liability is something that's taking money out of your pocket. And that is, you're paying your mortgage, you're paying your bills, you're paying the costs for maintenance, and you're paying for that all the time. So it's not an investment as such from that point of view. And it is, as you say, a long, long term, long way down. If you're going to retire or you're going to move or downsize, that's when you realize the difference, that, the value that's gone up. And it doesn't really increase. There was time back in 2005 where properties were increasing. You buy a property and the next day it was worth more. but that was just that bubble that happened back then.
Yeah. I love the fact you've brought up a brilliant personal finance book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And the fact that some people think a property is an asset rather than a liability. And obviously, if it's taking money out of your bank account and it's costing a lot to own that asset, it is a liability. But obviously, sometimes what we hear is, oh, well, if you're renting, you're paying somebody else's mortgage, or you're not on the ladder, so your money's kind of going down the drain. What's your feeling on that? Because obviously everyone's circumstances are different, and there's nothing wrong with renting, is there?
Absolutely not. I mean, we have a bit more of a mobile society anyway. People do move around. People don't stay in one place for long periods of time. People move with their work or change jobs. And if you've got a house and you're moving somewhere else in another part of the country, then you're in that situation. Oh, I've got to sell this before I can buy something else, or do I rent it? But if you're renting yourself, you can just say, right, hello, Mr. Landlord, I'm moving. Here's my notice period, and I find somewhere else that's more suitable. Family member of ours just recently moved because they had another child. I mean, they were in the same rental property for 18 years, but they've had a second child, and it's just too small for them, so they've moved on. So that's a bit more difficult to do if you own a property. I wouldn't say there's any negative as such to rental, unless you have the old-fashioned mindset that you must own property, and that's one of those things that some people get stuck in that trap. The flip side of that is that actually to have a property you own and pay the mortgage on it is probably a bit cheaper at the moment than it is to rent. So it just depends on your personal circumstances, whether when you're moving around a
Yeah.
lot.
And obviously, we've gone through a period where we've had even lower interest rates than we have right now. When I first bought a property, I think interest rates were 15%. So for our younger viewers who are listening or watching this, imagine having an interest rate of 15%, not 4% or 2%. And obviously, we talked about timing of property and interest rates. And how would you explain to somebody, just in a basic level, what is it interest rate? On a mortgage, how does that work? Just really basic levels.
Really basic level. So your interest rate is just that. It's what you're paying to the borrower for them allowing you to borrow that money. Um, if you're buying your own home, inevitably it could be a repayment mortgage, which means you're paying some interest and you're paying some of the loan back. If you're doing a rental or an investment property, we suggest you use interest only, which means you only pay interest on the property. The downside on the loan, sorry, the downside of that is that you never pay back any of that loan. So if you take £100,000 loan on an investment property, you're still going to have £100,000 loan in 20 years' time when you come to sell it. Yep, the property's probably gone up quite considerably by then, so it's not a big deal. For your personal house, it's very difficult now when you're buying a personal house to get interest only. So you might pay slightly better interest rates, but you also pay some of the capital that you've borrowed back to the bank.
Yeah. And just staying with someone's own home. So let's say they bought their home, they've seen an increase in value. You can actually borrow money from within your home, can't you? Just talk us through what you can do there, which you might then maybe come to someone like yourself and look to invest in other property.
So you can do something that's called either a further advance or a second charge, where let's say, for example, you bought your home in 1980 at 15% interest rates. That's dropped considerably, but your home's probably doubled or trebled in value since then. So in 1980, if you bought a £100,000 home, it might be worth 300,000 now, but you've still only got a mortgage of 100 or slightly less. Um, so if you're thinking about then using that equity, so you've only got £200,000 difference that you can then say, okay, to the bank, I'd like to borrow more money against my house because I want to do something else with it. Borrowing against your own property is cheaper than going straight for an investment mortgage as well. So you could borrow, I don't know, say you borrowed £50,000, that would be the deposit and some work to do on an investment property. You pull that out of your own home and you still only owe 150 on your own home, which is worth 300,000, but you've then got an investment property that's going to start putting money in your pocket and is actually an asset, not a liability.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I suppose at the end of the day, any investment, it's about taking some risk, finding somebody you trust, like you touched on before, not listening to everything and taking everything for granted. That's right. Um, obviously people do make mistakes with property because they maybe borrow too much, or they have situations where maybe the tenant's not paying the rent, or there are the negative sides as well as the positive sides. And I'm sure you've had building costs. One of the areas that is quite antiquated in the UK is the legal element of buying and selling a property. What's your top tip on that for someone maybe looking at buying their first property or looking at investing in property?
Gosh, there's a lot there, John. The first thing you said about the risk, it's like anything. If you don't know anything about it, it's a greater risk. If you go and learn about it, get educated, get someone to help you, then that risk can be reduced because you're working off the back of the mistakes they've made. So, I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, I'm sure, over the years, and we've learned from that, and we're then passing that experience on to other people. Um, and so that's really a best way of mitigating that risk. There's always some risk. We don't know what's going to happen. Donald Trump can invade England tomorrow, and it could be the United States of England tomorrow. And then who knows what will happen to house prices and interest rates and things like that. So that's something we can't control. But all the other bits you can control, and you can take good care of. So the legal side of things. So you have a conveyancing solicitor that's there to protect you when you buy the property, and their job is to make sure but they look at all the things that are going. So, for example, with one at the moment, somebody's selling something and the title deed isn't quite right. So, it's not unusual. And sometimes people go, oh my God, what's going on here? It's just that the property's been in the family for decades. It's never sold. It's just been passed down and passed down and passed down. So, when the land registry came into place in the 70s, it was never registered. So, when you come to buy that property, they're saying, well, prove you own it. So, how do I prove I own something that's just been handed down from the family for generations and generations? And so that is a challenge. And with a good conveyancer and a good legal team on board, they can help you get through that scenario and get it right. Because it may not be that somebody's trying to do something dodgy. It just may mean that they've never had to sell the house before.
Yeah. And but in the UK, certainly you have to have legal representation, don't you, to buy and sell a house? I'm pretty sure it's similar across the world, really.
Yes, you can do it yourself, but I wouldn't. I kinda there is I mean, everything's available online, isn't it, nowadays? Everywhere you can go and learn about investments in property. You can go and learn about what you do, online. But actually, the reality is you don't really know what you're doing because you haven't done it before. So go to the professionals and get the professionals to protect you and get the right professionals.
Yeah, it's really good guidance there. And I think, I know you've recently published a book, haven't you? You brought a book out on property, and tell us a little bit how you got there. What made you decide to do that?
Wow. So the book has been something I've been thinking about for a long time. Um, and I just never really had the structure, let's say. So I found a way to have a structured book written. And I did it all very quickly. It's all about investing in property. It's called The Book on UK Property, and it's on Amazon. And you can have, I think, 7 or 8 chapters in there of different ways to invest in property. And then there's a great chapter at the end about the creative way of investing in property. So you touched on earlier, do I need loads of money to start investing in property? Well, there's ways in there to show that you don't need loads of money to invest in property. You can start with very small amounts. There's always going to be legal costs and stamp duty and things like that on purchasing properties. But you can learn all the different ones that and find the ones that suit you, and then crack on and do it. I mean, there's some tools and some free downloadable um, spreadsheets and bits that I've put on there for people that are reading the book that really want to get on with it. It's just something that it's what I do, it's what I've done, it's my experiences, my warts and all kind of mistakes I've made as well. And does touch on a little bit about you mentioned about tenants and about what you do when you have a bad tenant, what you do when you have good tenants, how you because a lot of people I've met over the years have had tenants in a property for a long time, but they've never put the rent up because they're scared that the tenant might, the tenants have been great. They've not complained. They've not done anything, but they think if they put the rents up a little bit, then they might go away or might get grumpy or whatever. And actually, they've been in there 10 years. Now, realistically, inflation over 10 years, if you started at a rental rate of £500, it's probably nearer 1,000 now over 10 years, and they've never put it up. So it's better to do small increments regularly than to do a big, oh, by the way, the rent's now £1,000. They're going to go, no, thank you.
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes to mind here is like a fear of making a mistake, the fear of maybe having all this information and being overwhelmed with information that then actually prevents you from actually kind of going for it. And I think that there isn't a lot of fear about investing or property or, you know, the real return on property. Obviously you've got to take into consideration the costs, haven't you? But how would you feel about, I think there is a lot of overwhelm with financial things that, I mean, we're trying to help people with better financial futures by some basic information from our experiences of finance. But there is a lot of overwhelm and over lots of information out there, isn't there?
Is huge amount. A lot of people are frightened, like you said, I'm not going to do it because I might mess it up, and that stops them. Or what if I mess it up and I put myself in a worse financial situation? There's there was a couple, a mother and daughter that I was mentoring once, and we were looking at properties, and the daughter openly said to me, she says, "I'm quite frightened of numbers, literally scared of doing numbers." And I said, "Well, okay, I'm going to teach you in a very simple way how to do the numbers and how to do maths on a property to work out whether it's going to be a good investment or not." And so we were together for 3 days, and I taught her, showed her over and over and over the first day. And then when we started looking at properties, I said to her, "Go and do the numbers on them for me, just let's do it together." And by the third day, we're walking around properties, viewing properties, and she goes, "I know what the offer is on this. It's this, isn't it? Can I put it in?" And she'd gone from being so frightened of even looking at numbers to suddenly being confident to say, "Actually, I've been shown how to do this properly. I know this is the right thing to do. I can go forward and do it." So there's lots of people out there in a similar situation, no good at maths at school, whatever it is, whatever blocks you've got on maths. You don't have to be a mathematician to do this. You just need to know simple ways to work it out. That's all.
And those principles are the same whether you're buying for a home or buying as an investment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we have a recurring question that we ask our guests. So wait for it. Um, my question to you is, what was your biggest financial mistake?
I've got two actually, but I'll give you the first one. The first one was my very first purchase. Um, I, I told you I was self-employed. I went out and bought something. In actual fact, for those in the area that know the area of Trowbridge, there was a brand new block of flats being built in Trowbridge. A mortgage broker came up to me and said, "Look, if you put your money down on this, you'll get a below market value. It's not finished building. We'll get it cheap for you, and you'll get a property that's less than it's going to be worth on the market." And I thought, "Oh, fabulous!" So put my money down, bought the property, and actually, you then realise there are people out there that probably don't always tell you the truth. That the price I paid for it was the price that it should have been sold for. Then I went into obviously get a mortgage, and I bought paid all the bills and everything else, and got a tenant in there. After I'd paid all the bills, there was bills that I didn't realize were coming. Um, I was losing £50 a month. So that's £600 a year, which was supposed to be my pension pot, which going down rather than going up. So that was one of the big mistakes I made. And that's actually when I decided I was going to go and learn about it properly. The other thing I was going to do, again, nearby Swindon, I'd actually done some training. I'd learned a lot about it. And I'd found this property in Swindon that I was going to buy. And I was going to do something called a HMO then. And I'd done all the figures, and it was brilliant. Yep, it's going to earn me this. This is absolutely fabulous. And I engaged a mentor then to come with me and to see what I was doing, just to make sure I was doing it right. And because he stood back and he looked at it, he spotted something that I hadn't seen. And he said to me, "If you buy that property, you're going to lose £20,000. I went, "What?" And he pointed it out, and it was obvious what he found. But because I hadn't that experience or that learning, I was so focused on getting the numbers and I was going to get this money. Then when he said it, I went, "Well, that's obvious. That's really obviously the wrong thing to do."
And so you're kind of learning from your mistake, or you're close to making a mistake, and you're
Yes.
learning from that more so than probably the super successful stories. And at the time, it hurts, especially the first example. But you learn from that because you're on your toes and you've got that
Yeah.
knowledge. And as the sign behind me says, knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is power if you don't apply the knowledge you gain. So you've got loads more books than me, so you've obviously got a lot more knowledge than me. But um, Neil, really grateful for you coming on our new podcast. We'll put in the show notes the link to your book.
Thank you.
Good luck with that. And thank you so much for coming on and giving us your experience about property.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful for being on your podcast, and I hope it's going to be really successful.
Well, with you on it, of course it will be. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So this episode's top tip is to review your utility providers. We've been talking about property, and it seems to make sense to give you that top tip to really look at the costs of your utilities for your property or properties. So important you review these things. Hope that helps.